But that also leads me now to I'm thinking about this. We've only been talking about um the men being the daddies and the women being the babies. While you were working there, did you ever see sugar mamas and sugar babies with boys or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, there were male sugar babies on the site. I mean, most of them were gay, but
Okay, yeah, that.
there like a handful of sugar mommies, and usually it would be a couple that was like with a sugar mommy profile. And I mean, there just are not very many of them. And I mean, if you think about it, like a rich woman like doesn't really need a website to go like find a
No.
man to spoil. Like, I think men are just more willing to sleep with whoever as opposed to like an older guy who like is creepy or crusty or like whatever, like a young girl's not going to go for him.
Yeah.
So, but also like men, our biology dictates that we like to be monogamous. So
Yep.
we want to find one man to sleep with. And if a sugar mommy did want to go on the website and find one man to sleep with, then she just gets off the website and she has her one man. Whereas the men on the website are looking for multiple women, many women.
Oh,
So
I
they
didn't even
stay
think of that.
on the website more often. And, not to say that the website was 100% bad, because I do know a couple people who found their person and like got married or whatever off the website,
Oh.
but that's like 1%. Like a broken clock is right twice a day, but
Mhm.
the problem with that is the good ones get off the site. They don't stay on the site because they found their person, they're in a relationship, they're off. The bad ones come back again and again, and one predator can hit so many victims. So, by definition, there are just so many more victims than there are predators. And because victims are ashamed and the culture of secrecy and discretion keeps them quiet because they are scared of what might happen to them, then the predators are able to go back and do it again. So it's, yeah, so yes, there were sugar mummies, but just very, very rarely.
Okay. That's interesting as well. I keep saying that's interesting just because I
Well,
don't know what else to say. It's all just so interesting to me. It's really fascinating. Just how this whole kind of network works and just how this exchange of goods and sex and, the different people in it. Cause I'm girls go through and through. So I'm not just that I'm not going to blame the girls. And I'm just thinking of like some of the girls, like, I don't know if you saw, did you ever see the movie Hustlers with,
no, no, I didn't see it, but I know what you're talking about, where they're
yeah.
like
So
scamming the men and stuff.
yeah. Well, one of the girls who was a hustler, Lily, she's played by Lily Reinhart from Riverdale. And if in her backstory, if I remember correct, I think her mom kicked her out or her parents died or something, but she was all out on her own, living in a terrible apartment. And like, I just think about that a lot. And, not everybody, because I know sometimes I say that people like, not every woman, sure, not every woman has that story, but I think a lot of people do. And I promise you, no one goes to this website just thinking like, yeah, I'm going to just have a bunch of sex and be used and who cares? Like most people are coming like wanting a relationship, who need money, who are like it's not like people it's almost out of desperation, I think a lot of times. And I mean, we can even say that with dating apps. Like I'll admit, like I'm on dating apps sometimes for desperation. Like if I could just find one person. So just I think that's just something also to remember. The dichotomy between, a sugar baby and a sugar daddy as well. I have two-ish more questions for you. The first one, I was trying to figure out a good segue, but I couldn't find a segue. In the Breaking Points interview, you mentioned that you believe that this is human trafficking. Can you kind of expand on that?
Sure. That's an important point because it's not always trafficking, but
Right.
I do know that the website is used by traffickers. And I think I just want to like break those terms down for people because colloquially we hear the term pimp
Mm-hmm.
in place of the word sex trafficker, which is what a pimp really is. And it's funny because like P. Diddy, who wrote the song about being a PIMP, is now in prison on sex trafficking charges. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
full circle moment. That's what a
Mm-hmm.
pimp really is a sex trafficker. And I think people aren't really familiar with what sex trafficking really is a lot of times. They think it's only immigrant children kept in cages being transported across the border and stuff like that. And like that certainly does happen. I'm not discounting that. And it's obviously completely terrible. But more often, especially in America, sex trafficking is done by someone you know
Mm-hmm.
or by someone you trust. And what it really is when a procurer, a pimp, usually a man, procures young women or young whoever or just whoever and takes them from one place to another, oftentimes across state lines, to then have them paid for sex. So like, for instance, I was talking about Diddy, like the Diddy parties, right? Like what would happen is a trafficker, a man, would procure sex workers, however he was going to procure them. Maybe he was using a website, maybe he wasn't, and he would bring them to the party and then they would be paid for sex. So that's trafficking. That's trafficking right there.
You're so right. Yeah.
And some people don't, even when they hear that, some people are like, oh my gosh, like I've been sex trafficked. And it's like, yeah, a lot of times trafficking is done to willing participants. And the ones who are complacent and complicit are the ones who are then elevated and given lots of money or business class or status in the music industry or whatever it may be, because they are the ones who are willing to be abused. And I think we're seeing that now with this, age of crumbling celebrity, with the people who have been elevated to these positions of celebrity are often the ones who were victimized and then turn around and do the victimizing. So I think that's kind of an important distinction to make, because like you mentioned earlier as well, it's more nuanced than just grabbing someone and kidnapping them and taking them.
Yeah.
Like, no, it's one guy goes on Seeking Arrangement and finds a bunch of girls to invite to a party, and then all the girls come to the party, and then he finds out what they're willing to do. Are they willing to take drugs? Are they willing to have sex for money? Who's willing to do what? And the ones who are willing are the ones who are then given money or paid or get to meet P. Diddy or whatever it is. I'm just like speaking hypothetically. But that's the real situation of trafficking. And while maybe that is fine because they are willing participants, it gets a lot worse when the person maybe is no longer a willing participant, but the trafficker doesn't want to take that for an answer. So they use tactics of coercion, manipulation, threats to trick someone into doing that, or to force someone into being trafficked. There was this really good show on HBO called The Deuce. I don't know if you ever saw it or
I
heard of
haven't
it.
seen that one.
I mean, it wasn't a very big show, but it was such a well done show, and it really shows the nuance of how these traffickers rope, like you said, vulnerable, manipulatable people into these lives, and then sometimes through like abuse and like physical harm, they force them into continuing that lifestyle. But at the same time, they're telling that person like, oh no, I love you, babe. Like, oh, you're my girl, like all of this. And if it's a person who doesn't come from money, like you're saying, like the character in Hustlers, who doesn't have a good relationship to look up on and know that this isn't right.
Yeah.
A trafficker who is telling her this or telling her that, that's the only time she's ever been told something like that. So it's really, they willingly believe these things, and then they are coerced and threatened and all the rest. So yeah, it's a very nuanced thing. And I think people, a lot of times they hear this word sex trafficking thrown around and they really don't know what it is, or they think they know, but it's many different things. So it's not just one, it's a lot, but most commonly, yeah, it is like someone who you know or trust who convinces you to do that.
I'm so glad you shared this. If you have listened to this podcast before, everyone, you know I say this all the time. You are more likely to be trafficked by someone you know. And I think we as women, I just always think about like the people who will, and no shade to anyone who this has happened to, and it's quite possible, but statistically it's not. People who will go to Target and they'll be like, I saw a rapper at the near my tire. I think someone's like marking me and things like that. And that's possible. Once again, no shade, but that's very unlikely. Statistically, that's unlikely. What Brooke said is definitely, statistically, I believe it's like 60% of people who are trafficked by someone that they love, someone that they know. So I think it's also just really important to remember that. And if you are listening and you feel as if something like this has happened to you, please, reach out, tell someone. I think it's important to, talk about these things. We're not done the episode, but I want to say this now specifically since we're talking about it, since it's so heavy. If you feel like something like this has happened, it's really important for you to reach out, tell someone, kind of talk about it with someone you trust, someone that loves and cares about you. Because, I think a lot of people, like you said, don't know that that's what that is. Because TV has also made, like, what's the movie with Liam Neeson? Taken. I think that's what we think human trafficking is. And then, like I said, like the rapper at your will at Target, or, the guy that you've seen twice in line in Target. Once again, I'm not saying that that's not true. I'm just saying like that's statistically not as likely. So I think it's really important for us to just understand and remember this. Pay attention to the company that you keep as well. If someone you're friends with or someone in your friend group is like making you uncomfortable, if you notice this guy's always around and he just comes a little, like, don't get friendly with people who you probably shouldn't be getting friendly with too. That's just another side note.
Well, speaking of statistics, there is a statistic that about a third of trafficking victims met their abuser online as well.
Oh.
So it's a lot of times it's people you know or people you get to know. And a lot of times it's someone you met on a sugar daddy website.
Yeah. Thank you for watching this clip of Those Are the Girls with Mallory and Friends. You can watch the full episode here on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts.